nobody knows what you're thinking or feeling unless you tell them.
Right.
We have so much in our heads that we assume is obvious, and
Hmm.
people are so different in ways that you cannot even imagine that it doesn't occur to us that you would think any different. When you say, "Would you please change the light bulb?" it doesn't occur to you that anybody would think that you meant later or tomorrow. You just mean now.
Right.
David, when he asks you, "Could you go pick up the milk?" He doesn't mean now, but he doesn't have any sense that you think it differently. Now, you guys have been through this a couple times and are probably starting to get used to it, but for
Hmm.
sure it needs to be said explicitly a little bit until we get to know each other better, until we are more in each other's heads, because why would I know what you think? Again, I just assume that's the way everybody is because that's the way I am.
Right.
It tends not to work so well in the long run. It's tough because your dad is your dad.
Hmm.
And certainly, folks from this older generation are coming from a different place. I think more and more in the modern world, people are trying to move towards more understanding, parenting with, positivity and empathy rather than force and hitting. I mean, people are not so into spanking these days. And I'm sure your dad is one of those who says, well, if people should be spanked more, it would help a lot and all these.
Yeah. What's funny is he never spanked us, but my mom tore our tails up.
Yeah. And that's kind of the way it was back then. And, no judgment. Everybody was doing the best they could with the tools they had.
Hmm.
So I don't know that there's a great way to resolve this with your father to do it differently. I mean, you can ask him to do it, not to speak to you the way he did.
Hmm.
But you're right. He may not see your side. He may not want to see your side, and that's unfortunate. That kind of limits how close this relationship will be,
Hmm.
right? If somebody is always right and refuses to see another perspective, there's a limit to how close you're going to get to that person.
Right.
But in your marriage, one would hope that you can have that conversation and say, hey, look, I would like this to be a really close, intimate relationship. Let's do this differently. Can we talk in a way that we're both hearing each other? And of course, this is what I do in my work all the time. And this is what the book is all about is how to have those conversations and feel like we are a team.
Hmm.
Feel like it's not adversarial, but collaborative.
Right.
Like, hey, we don't agree about this. We don't like what happened, but can we work on this so that we are still a married couple with intimacy, with connection, instead of two fighting people?
Right.
Uh, and yeah, there are certainly marriages where one person doesn't want to do that or isn't able to because they're impaired by some mental or cognitive issue, and it's sad. But there's a limit. It takes two people to have a relationship, and if one person does not want to relate to you, meaning to get into your world and see what it's like over there, there's a limit there. There's a boundary. I would
Hmm.
say that just because she has an issue with it doesn't mean that you have to stop. It just means that you have to take it into account. We have to talk about this,
Hmm.
right? Maybe you shouldn't be allowed to do that. Maybe the wife has a problem. I don't want you having any friends outside the house. Like that might be very extreme. I don't
Yeah.
know that I would say you have to do that, but you do have to take that into account. Doesn't matter how extreme it is. You have to say, well, what is it about that bothers you and why and how? And let's understand that,
Hmm.
right? And of course, if somebody, again, if they're that rigid and demanding that they say you cannot speak to anybody except for me, that may be a problem for our relationship. But
Yeah.
we
That's
can,
a ridiculous boundary.
yeah, I made an extreme.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good to make extremes though, because that's what people relate to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but so you can still talk about that and understand, like, hey, why is that important to you? What about this means something to you? And that means we're a team,
Right.
even though we may not agree on the outcome, right? The
Mhm.
outcome we'll figure out later. Let's first understand what's going into this.
Yeah.
Although the truth is, there are some people who, can, like let's say open marriages or whatever else there is. The boundaries that I think are important and that you think are important may not be important to somebody else, right? Again, you guys figure it out. You guys have to talk about it. Instead of arguing or instead of putting your foot down, let's understand each other and figure out how you can best connect. Yeah, I mean, that's what we're talking about here about being adversarial. If we're arguing, if you're telling me I can't go do this on the internet and I say, well, I want to, and we argue, and then one of us comes out on top. So great. So now one of us is a winner and one of us is a loser, right? So that's not a great place for a team to be when one of us feels lousy.
Right. A
But
team should win together or lose together.
yeah, but the thing is, even if you are the winner, that means that you are now married to a loser, right? So that's
Yeah.
not a good
Yeah.
place for you as the winner either.
Yeah.
Nobody comes out on top that way if somebody's going to win. It has to be the two of us together figuring out what's best for the two of us together. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, sometimes people try to change other people because they have the sense that everyone should be like me. Again, like we
Hmm.
were saying before, like my way is the way to do it. But
Hmm.
sometimes it's a question of fundamental values, right? If
Right.
our fundamental values are not aligned, we have a problem. There are people who can live with that. You
Hmm.
know, you see Republicans and Democrats married all the time, and there are lots of arguments, but they're okay with that. But there are some people for whom there's a certain value, whether it's, whatever the political issue of the day is, or religious issues, or whatever it is. If those are fundamental values and your spouse is not on board, or your partner, whatever it is, you may need to consider whether this is a relationship that's going to work for you.
Right.
I don't need to leave my wife because she shows up late.
Right.
It's just okay. So, but there are people who will fight about these things, and I get it. You want to get there on time. You don't want to be rushed. Sure, fine. How do we do this differently? How
You
can we
drive
talk about
separately.
great? That's a
Yeah.
great solution, right?
Yeah.
It's not always possible, and there'll still be friction.
Hmm.
And what I'm all about is having a conversation even about the things that you disagree on, even the things that you want differently, we can still feel like we're doing this together. Very
Okay.
stressful situation. I
Right.
mean, you have similar things even in a nuclear family where they don't agree on how they're managing a certain situation with the kid, or you're too hard on him, you're too soft on him, classic. And then, with step families, the ante is raised because it's your kid, it's my kid, it's not your kid, right? That's the
Yep.
whole. Okay. And I think this is, definitely one of the stressful points in a marriage. And I think it's all the same thing. It's like, hey, let's stop and understand where you're coming from.
Hmm.
What I tell people is that there have to be two conversations about this. The first conversation is the exploration conversation, where we just talk about what are the issues? What's bothering me? What's bothering you?
Hmm.
We are not going to solve the problem right now.
Hmm.
The second conversation is the resolution conversation,
Hmm.
where we will talk about what to do. But right now, we are not going to talk about what to do. We are not going to change the outcome based on this conversation.
Right.
And that takes off the pressure to move through it. Let me just understand what's bothering you. When you see me talk to Timmy this way, what is that like for you? Well, I'm stressed out. I'm worried he's going to start crying. I'm worried he's going to start a tantrum. Okay, I can understand why you'd be worried about that. That makes sense. Let
Hmm.
me tell you how I'm feeling about it. I'm worried if I don't come down hard on him, then he'll do that, and he'll turn out to be a failure, and he won't, and all these things.
Yeah.
And you understand how that makes sense to me, right? So we're just exploring the territory, trying to understand each other's internal worlds when it comes to this situation. That will set us up to come to a solution that actually works, because you cannot solve a problem that you don't understand.
Right.
It sounds pretty obvious, but we do it all the time. Oh,
Yes.
you're yelling at him, this, no, and we try to solve the problem without understanding. Like, well, why are you angry? Why are you worried? What's going
Mhm.
on under the surface? If we
Right.
can stop and figure that out, we're going to come to a much better solution afterwards, much more easily. I mean, that is true, and you have to combine that with reality, which is you're probably always hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. Life is tough. If you got kids, you got multiple kids, you got step kids. It's challenging. So
Hmm.
on one hand, don't run into a conversation when you can't pull it off. On the other hand, you may need to carve out times to pull it off, right?
Right.
And sometimes that might mean skipping that or pushing this off or something, leaving the dishes in the sink overnight while
Hmm.
you guys go and have a conversation. Okay, what's going on with us here?
Right. And like you said, it's not, we can't express this enough to people. It's not, we need to sit down for 2 hours. We need to hash this out and come up with a solution right now.
Right.
No, no,
Guess what? The tough problems in your life will not have solutions that you will come up with today.
right. Or tomorrow for that matter.
Right? It's
Yeah.
going to be a series of conversations, right? Whether it's how you're going to raise the kids or managing the blend
Mhm.
or, your finances or your sex life or whatever it is, these are lifelong issues that
Mhm.
will require multiple conversations over time. It's not one conversation will solve it and then we're good. And when you start that conversation calmly, but it goes sideways and someone gets ramped up, you take a break and you come back to it later. You don't push it under the rug, never to talk about it again.
Yep.
But you can't do it well. Don't. I've been teaching this to people for years, and I don't do it well when I'm worked up. So I'll
Right.
take a break and we'll come back to it. I think it's fine. People are angry. You can't make yourself not angry. Taking
Right.
a break is great, right? What's
Yeah.
wrong with that? Sometimes, people feel like, oh, if my spouse is angry at me, I have to go fix it right away. No, you don't. Let
Right.
them be angry. Who
Yeah.
wants who wants someone to come up to them and try to appease them when they're angry? Take a
Mhm.
break,
Yeah.
right? You'll be angry. Okay, you can be angry. I'll go here and I'll do the dishes, whatever, and we'll talk later when you're ready. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable. It's not
Right.
great, but it's much better than the alternative, which is we turn it into a big fight because we have to talk right now, this minute, when you're too angry to talk. When I
Right.
take a break, I just go do something else. Later in the day, I've done stuff out like I come back, like it's not even a big deal.
Yeah.
For me, it's not sitting there stewing on it necessarily. It's I go and I just move on. I know because I have confidence that we'll talk about it later if I need to.
Right.
I might come back and be like, you know what? That's not even a big deal, anyways. Who cares?
Now, and if you don't need to talk about it, if she does, then she needs to bring that up.
Sure. Yeah, we can
Don't
talk
just
about it.
sit on stuff and let it fester.
Right. No, that's not going to work. Trying to put it away. We're not going to talk about it. It'll be fine, but it's not fine. Right. There are a
Hmm.
lot of things that are fine. Right. I got mad at my wife the other day for I don't even remember what. I was annoyed at her, and she knew I was annoyed at her. And then I came back later, and I was like, I don't. It's no big deal. I mean, whatever. People make mistakes, and we already know each other's little weaknesses and quirks, and okay, no big deal. We didn't have to talk about it. But if we do have to talk about it, then we will talk about it later. The
Yeah.
better you get at talking about difficult issues, the less stressful it'll be when one comes up.
Hmm.
Because you'll say to yourself, you know what? I'm not going to talk about it now. I'm too mad. But I know we will later. Right?
Hmm.
Or he's mad at me. I know we'll talk about this later. So the better you get at it, the more confident you are in your skills to communicate, the less stressful it'll be when these things come up. I mean, first of all, they need to be able to be calm when they're talking. People who are getting riled up and throwing jabs at each other, it sounds to me like they're not particularly calm. Very few people calmly think to themselves, you know what? I should be a jerk right now and say a nasty thing. That's
Hmm.
not how it happens. It happens when people lose control.
Hmm.
So if it's getting to that point, probably it means they need a break.
Hmm.
If you can come in when you are calm enough, it doesn't mean you have to be not angry at all or not worried or not sad. It just means you have to be in control. So
Hmm.
if you're in control, then yeah, the talking stick method, whether you use a physical one or just a metaphorical one where we take turns, that's really helpful. If you're having trouble with that, certainly talking to a mediator, a marriage coach, a counselor, whatever it is. I do that a lot with couples where I say, okay, 1 second, one person at a time. You talk, you listen, and then sometimes I
Hmm.
have to say, wait, you're not talking right now. One second, he's
Not your
talking,
turn. Not your turn.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other person, we just get into each person's world individually. First, I want to hear what you think and how you feel, and you're just listening.
Hmm.
And we should know, by the way, that doesn't mean that he's right and you're wrong. We're assuming that his world is his world right now, and then we'll switch to yours. What does it
Hmm.
look like in your world? And if we can both agree, okay, I'm not agreeing with your perception of reality, but I want to hear what you think, then we
Right.
can take turns doing that and we can get through that. And it is hard because you might say something I don't like. You said, well, when you left the empty waffle box in the thing, well, I didn't leave it there. Well, you left. Okay, that's an argument. I'm not arguing with you. When you tell me how you
Right.
feel about the waffle box, oh, so you feel disrespected. Yeah, I can see why that would happen. Well, that sucks for you. I'm so sorry you felt that. So
Hmm.
I haven't agreed that I've done anything wrong. And maybe
Right.
I haven't, but I know that it's hurting you and I care that it's hurting you. And that is a platform where we can go from that to something better. I'm
Right.
really sorry that happened to you. If
And
I'm
I
talking about
pray. Yeah.
you, I'm inviting you to argue with me. Because if I said
Right.
you did this, you are definitely going to say, no, I didn't. You did that for no, I did it. It's an argument.
Right.
Talking about you, I'm inviting you to argue with me. And if I'm talking about me, I'm inviting you to care. I
Right.
had a tough day. I didn't, when you yelled at me, I got really upset or scared or whatever. I'm inviting you to join in with how I feel.
Yeah.
If I start the sentence with you, then I am.
Yep.
You did that. I'm inviting you to argue. Look, come on, let's argue about it because I want to talk about what you did. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. No,
Yep.
happens all the time. But if I say I'm feeling scared right now, you can't argue with me. No, you're not.
Right.
You don't know, like this is how I'm feeling. You can say
Yeah.
I shouldn't, you can say that, but you're listening to me right now. And I'm
Mhm.
not asking you to agree that I'm right. I'm asking you to care about how I feel.
Right.
Much better conversation.
Yes. I had a lady one time tell me, golly, again, that was many moons ago. I worked with her and there were some things going on in my relationship. And we were talking, and she said, your feelings are true to you.
Yeah.
You have to pay attention to them. Don't dismiss them because somebody thinks you're crazy for feeling that way.
They are what they are. You cannot make yourself feel a different way.
Right.
If
If
you
you could make yourself love your ex and then be a happy family, right?
That'd be great. Very
Hmm.
simple. But you feel angry or you feel scared or you feel nervous or whatever it is, you feel that and that's okay. That doesn't mean there is a problem that needs to be fixed necessarily. That's
Hmm.
just how you feel. And
Right.
often the best solution is just, can you hear me out?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you care that I'm angry at you, that might be all that we need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you don't need to fix anything. Or you
Right.
know what? If you hear how angry I am about the waffle box, you will probably think about that twice next time you put the box back in the freezer.
Hmm.
Much more so than if I say you're a big fat jerk for putting the box empty. You're
Hmm.
you're not going to want to change it. If I say, you know what, I feel really disrespected when you leave the empty waffle box there. If you listen to me and you care, And I'm not judging you and telling you to grovel and be, yes, you're right. No. We're not agreeing. I just want you to care how I feel. And if you do care how I feel, then it will probably change on its own. More likely than not, your spouse is not a sociopath. They are not deliberately being evil to you. They have their reasons for what they do.
Right.
If you can understand that, it changes the whole situation. If you just argue with them why they're wrong for borrowing your sweater or taking whatever it is, we're not going to get very far. But if you
Right.
try to understand why are they doing what they're doing, how do they feel about it, we can make a difference. People like to think I do what I do because I've thought it out, that I'm being rational, but that's rarely the case. We do what we do because of how we feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
Very few people change their behavior based on intellectual understanding. That's why, they show you pictures of blackened lungs and don't just read you off why it's a bad idea. They want to induce a feeling to help you change, right?
Right.
Emotion, the motion part of emotion is not incidental. Emotion is what moves us. It's what motivates us to do something.
Right.
So it's important to talk about things, but I have definitely waited, days before addressing something because it was bothering me and I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't do it calmly. Okay, so I'll wait a few days. Yeah,
Yeah.
when I talk to people about taking these breaks, if you can establish beforehand, hey, if I get too worked up, I'm just going to say I need a break and I'm going to walk out. That is not an offense against you. That is me protecting our relationship.
Right.
And when you see it that way, it's less offensive. It's still difficult. It's not comfortable for either person when we need to walk away from each other. But again, much better than the alternative, which is a big, loud, nasty fight. There are things we can do to help that be a little easier. For example, we talk about it beforehand. This is what's going to happen. I will take a break and then I will come back later and we'll talk about it again the next day or whatever. When you walk away, if you're calm enough to say, I can't talk about it now, we'll talk tomorrow, that's better,
Mm-hmm.
right? But if you're too angry at that point, it's good to have a plan in advance. If I walk away, I will come back 1 hour later and we'll check in. And then you
Right.
come back and you show that you're good for it, that you will come back. And that makes it easier for the other person to wait around.
Mm-hmm.
Because the impulse that makes you follow around is, well, we're not going to solve this. And it's going to
Right.
get worse. And we're going to get divorced. And it's going to be
Yep.
terrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we need to speak to that beforehand and say, that's not what's going to happen. We are going to talk about it. And again, the better we get at the communication skills, the more confident we can be that we will come back and we will talk about this, just not now. LOVE. You listen,
Oh.
you reflect in your own words, you validate, you empathize. When you are listening to your partner express how they feel, that's the only thing you're doing. Those four things and nothing else. Because
Mhm.
sometimes people try this, they try explaining, right? Well, no, what happened was, oh, that's not what I meant, right?
Yeah.
You're mad at me. That's not what I meant. Because I think if you knew what I meant, you'd feel better. And that
Sorry you
doesn't
took it
work.
that way. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that never works. And anybody listening to this can verify with their own experience that has never worked.
Mm-hmm.
Never has somebody said, oh, no, I didn't mean that. I meant this. And the other person goes, oh, I'm not mad anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it just raises the ante.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing you're doing when you're listening is listening, reflecting your own words, validating and empathizing, and we'll get through it. And then we switch, and then you got to listen to me.
Yeah. And
So
listening's hard.
it is hard. And it's hard to hold on to your own stuff when you hear things that you don't like being said. But again, we're assuming the other person is doing their part properly. If you're telling me what a big fat jerk I am and how rotten I am, and I don't do this and I don't do that, it's not going to get very far. But if
Right.
you're telling me how bad you feel when I say XYZ and
Mm-hmm.
how much you wish that we spent more time together, whatever else it is, I can be there and I can say, you know what? I hear how hard it is for you that we're not spending time together. It sounds like you feel lonely. I'm so sorry you feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're connecting. I haven't agreed that I've done anything wrong, and maybe I haven't. This is
Right.
not about who's right or wrong. This is
Right.
about I care about you. We have to disconnect from this who's right and
Mm-hmm.
just talk about empathy. That's the bottom line. Do I have empathy for you? Whether you're right or you're wrong, I can have empathy. We find this a little bit easier with our kids, right? Your
Mm-hmm.
kid drops their lollipop or something. You have 7 lollipops in the closet, but you don't start sitting there saying, "Oh, it's no big deal." Like, some people do that. It's not very effective. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you really wanted that lollipop, right? So whether you're right or you're wrong, I have empathy. It's the same for adults. You know what? You thought that I did XYZ. You interpreted my words this way. Okay. I'm mad at you and you're mad at me. Fine. I have empathy for you. You can have
Right.
empathy for me. We can be in this together.
Got
Something like, when I get yelled at, I feel afraid. Like it doesn't make sense.
Right.
If I can refer to you sort of up by the way. I'm trying to tell you a story about what's going on for me. You are a character in the story, but
Mm-hmm.
I am the main character. So I'm talking about me, right? Here's what happens to me when you yell.
Mm-hmm.
When you yell, I feel afraid and I don't want to be around, and it's just very stressful for me. So
Hmm.
again, I'm talking about me. I did say you, but it wasn't a story about you. You yell too much. You're selfish. You're an angry person. You need therapy.
Hmm.
That's not helpful. I referred to you because you're a character in the story. I cannot tell the story of my life without you being in it.
Right.
But you are one of the side characters, and I'm the main character in the story right now. And then we'll switch. And you'll
Right.
tell me a story about your life where you are the main character and you talk about you. And maybe I come up incidentally, but I'm not the main focus of that story. I think the important thing is to be focusing on the positive.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need to count each one, but the negative stuff jumps out at us, sticks in our brain, gets in our face. The positive stuff is very easy to let go, right? The fact that, David takes out the trash and, picked up the milk and went grocery shopping, all these things that you take for granted. And the one time he leaves the waffle box, it drives you crazy. That's totally normal and human. And
Right.
it takes us being focused and saying, you know what, there are so many things they do well, right? Like my
Right.
wife makes dinner basically every night, and I don't cook because I'm lousy and I hate it. And I am grateful every single night.
Hmm.
I am. I feel grateful because otherwise I'd be eating tuna every
Right.
day.
Yeah. Or
And I
waffles,
say,
if
yeah,
there's any in the freeze.
I'm very, careful to verbalize and just tell her all the things that I appreciate as frequently as I can. Right.
Hmm.
So 5-1 or 6-1 or 7-2, I don't care, but keep focusing on the positive and make sure that you're noticing those things to say them.